The West Virginia National Guardsman, who is in critical condition after being shot this week in Washington, D.C., is, quote, hanging on, according to officials. The update coming from Representative Riley Moore of West Virginia, who gave the update on Fox and Friends this morning. The congressman spoke of the 24-year-old guardsman, Andrew Wolfe, saying that Andy is hanging on. We heard on Fox and Friends earlier today that they have a number of investigators looking into this situation. I will play out a little bit of Representative Moore. Again, he's of West Virginia. He was on Fox and Friends earlier today. Let's play a little bit of this out. Again, him speaking on the condition of the second victim who is continuing to hang on, as he puts it. Let's listen.
I've stayed in touch with Andy's family there. Andy lives and his family about 20 minutes down the road from me. And I think what people need to know is that this is a family that is committed to service, not only to the great state of West Virginia, but this country. His father's a deputy sheriff in the county next to mine. And Andy wanted to follow in that footsteps and serve his nation as a National Guardsman. And Andy is hanging on, and he's a fighter. And his family has told me that time and time again. He is a fighter. But above all, what they want here is for everybody to continue to pray. I believe in the power of prayer, and I can promise you his parents believe in the power of prayer. And I know there's a lot of prayer warriors that watch this show. Please keep praying.
So he was just there talking about the 24-year-old victim, Andrew Wolfe. What you're looking at now is the 29-year-old suspect. This is the mugshot of Ramanullah Lakanwal. The suspect is from Afghanistan. He faces multiple charges, including 1 count of first-degree murder, 2 counts of assault with intent to kill while armed. Attorney General Pam Bondi also saying that the Justice Department will pursue the death penalty, as I mentioned. Retired Marine Intelligence Officer, National Security Analyst, and the host of the Strat podcast, Hal Kempfer, is here with us. Hal, before we get into the nitty-gritty of his background and what we're learning about the suspect's past, let's talk about a motive. Any clarity whatsoever, motive-wise, at this point?
You know, it's really interesting, Austin. They've looked into it. They've been trying to find if there's anything online, you know, any possible radicalization. Obviously, with something like this, we're looking at Islamic extremism tied to ISIS or Al-Qaeda or some other motivation along those lines. Nothing has come up. There's talk about whether they did the vetting correctly. I'm looking at this, and I've been in the vetting business or whatever for a very long time, and I don't think there was anything wrong with the vetting per se. I think they just did what they did, and he was working with the CIA. He was working with Special Operations Forces. That's about as well vetted as you're going to get with a foreign partner. So when he came over here, it looked like he was somebody that we could feel fairly secure about. Now, there were reports of PTSD. There are also reports, it kind of goes back and forth, that he may have been, they basically, people said he had been changing or he had changes in the months preceding this. So it could be something psychological. It could be a culmination of the frustration that he put all those years on the line, with this very elite unit that he was part of, which got into some pretty hairy tactical situations over the many years, and dealing with the fact that Afghanistan had basically under Taliban rule, all that sacrifice, everything. So there's a lot of supposition, if you will, as to what his motive was, but frankly, nothing else seems to jump out. So it's clearly something that was probably, unless we find out something different, probably more on the psychological side. Although we do have reports today that there was a plan by another Afghan refugee that was in the United States that he was threatening a bombing attack the day before in the Fort Worth area. So obviously the FBI will be pursuing that to find out if there's any connection between these two, if they were talking online or anything else. because obviously anytime you have one attack, your big fear is that this may not be a one-off, that this might be connected to something else like a larger conspiracy.
You know, the suspect entered the United States in 2021 through Operation Allies Welcome. That was an operation. It was a Biden-era program that evacuated and resettled tens of thousands of Afghans after the U.S. withdrawal from the country. Why did the U.S. deem this program necessary, Hal?
Well, we had thousands, tens of thousands, literally hundreds of thousands, if you want to get to it, people who worked with us over that, the 2 decades, over 2 decades, or the more than 2 decades that we were in Afghanistan. They had been part of the Afghan National Forces, but they also worked with us in a variety of other roles, translators, logistics, you name it, across the board. So we had a lot of these, Afghans who had basically gone into harm's way, put themselves in harm's way because of their connection with the U.S. government, their connection with the Afghan national government. And we owed them something as we were pulling out and the Taliban are coming over. We owed them, basically owed them they put their lives on the line for us. We kind of owed them something. And so we have this program to bring them back in. For the most part, it's been a pretty successful program. Obviously, this is an exception. We're going to find out what this is, but I would say with the number of Afghans that came over, I'm not surprised that you would have a situation like this. My memory goes back. We brought over a lot of refugees from Cambodia and Vietnam after our experience there in the late 70s, early 80s. And I can recall in my small hometown, a farm town in Central California, that we had someone who had been involved with the war there, working with our forces, had severe PTSD and went on a knife attack and took some casualties. And you kind of scratch your head and you go, how did that happen? It's like, I'm not a psychiatrist or a psychologist, but sometimes people have some very serious problems, and they result in some horrible things that can happen, especially when you put a weapon in their hands.
So we continue to track the well-being of the living National Guard member. Again, I will just reiterate this. These are the two that were shot. Sarah Beckstrom, sadly, President Trump announcing on Thanksgiving that she had passed due to her wound. Andrew Wolfe, apparently hanging on per a family member who spoke with the press. So basically, let's continue on just talking about Operation Allies Welcome, also, Hal. Operation Allies Welcome. It brought roughly 76,000 people to the U.S. Many of those people had worked alongside U.S. troops and diplomats. As you mentioned, they were interpreters, translators. The suspect's family reportedly says that he started working as a security guard for a unit that was backed by the CIA in 2012. He was later promoted to become a team leader and a GPS specialist. He entered the U.S. in 2021, and then he was living in Washington state before the attack happened. He reportedly has a wife and 5 kids. So we know a decent amount about the suspect, but we don't have a full profile, Hal. What is standing out to you about what we do know about the suspect's profile so far? What are the top questions you have?
Well, the big issue that I saw was he was a member of what's called the zero units. These zero units were a very close hold unit that would go in and take out what we would call high value targets, or whether they were going to capture them or whether they were going to kill them. They would go in and basically clandestinely insert themselves out to take on these very dangerous, very difficult missions. And you can imagine there's a psychological toll that comes with that. I want to find out more about his state of mind. I want to find out how he was relating to those around him, his family, his friends, coworkers. What was he saying? What was he thinking? Obviously, one of the things that the FBI is doing a deep dive on is everything that he was doing online, but they're also going to be looking at, where was he going online? What was he looking at? Was he looking at some radicalized websites? Is this something where he could have radicalized online potentially himself? And of course, they'll also be looking at where he was in Bellingham, Washington. Was he associating with folks that might have some radical leanings, some violent extremist leanings in the area? As someone who used to do counterterrorism training, all over Washington State, to include Bellingham, Washington. That's something that we would always focus on. Is there someone out there who's saying things that could lead to violent extremism, showing indications and warning that they may be going that direction? I want to find out what happened. I want to find out if we missed any indicators on that and why we missed those indicators. And then that will say what corrective action we have to take in the future that something like this isn't missed. The chances, rarely does something like this happen where the individual was just completely covert and had, optimal operational security, and nobody around him had any idea that they had radicalized or were going this direction. Most people, before they're acting out in the real world, they're venting like crazy online, and we're going to find out if he was venting online, what he was saying, and find out what those motivations are. And by the way, that will also tell us, are there others out there that maybe we should be looking at more closely? Do we need to be, pushing this forward? Look, there's a lot of competing priorities with law enforcement, with public safety, and it's been a lot of years since 9/11. And maybe we need to go back and recharge some of those memory batteries on what are the indications of terrorism, what are the indications of violent extremism, and get everybody. It's one thing to say, see something, say something. It's a whole other thing to know what to look for and how to report it. And we need to probably do more on the latter.
So you mentioned the vetting process, and you mentioned that there's been some discussion out there about the practices surrounding the vetting process. I won't ask you if the vetting process is perfect. We don't know the intricacies of what exactly went into vetting each individual person. We're talking about tens of thousands of people that were let into the U.S. because of this program. But Hal, even if a vetting system is perfect, and you've already alluded to this, I hope you can expand on it. Even if a vetting process is perfect, people can still develop troubling tendencies after they've been vetted. How can we work on that issue?
That's a big issue, and you bring up a great point. You go through that whole thing. We ask them questions. We look at their past. Now, a lot of times in other countries, it's very difficult to really do a lot of vetting. I mean, if someone's on a plane and they arrive in Germany from Afghanistan after it's been overrun by Taliban, they say, well, I worked at so-and-so here and I was doing this. It's a little difficult to send somebody back there to talk to their coworkers and stuff if it's actually under Taliban control. So a lot of times with that vetting process, there are gaps that we don't fill. Sometimes we've used polygraphs as a tool. It's not a perfect lie detector by anything, but sometimes it will indicate if there's deception or some level of discomfort when they're being asked certain questions that we can probe further. But again, there will be gaps many times when we're dealing with foreign individuals coming over here, because we can't do the same sort of investigative methodology looking at their background overseas many times, depending on where they are, depends on which country. But in some of these countries, we just simply can't, like we can in the United States, or where we can in some of our closer allied countries like Europe, Japan, and elsewhere around the world. So it's not a perfect system at all in terms of that. And then the other problem is, once we have vetted them, people do change. They change their ideology, they change their philosophy, sometimes they'll change religions. And there's all sorts of things that can happen in their lives. And we've seen that before. We see it with spies all the time. That they've been vetted and they're in working, American citizens working for our intelligence organizations, and then something happens in their personal life and they decide to many times make some money by working for a foreign intelligence service. And it's always the after action thing is we got to look at them a lot closer when we're looking at them continuously. We need to look at them closer while they're doing stuff, not just this periodic reinvestigation thing that we tend to prefer.
So Hal, basically, and you alluded to this earlier in the interview as well, Fox News had some reporting this morning. They say that a different Afghan national was arrested this week after posting a video of himself on TikTok, indicating that he was building a bomb with the intent of doing something in the Dallas-Fort Worth area in Texas. The arrest happened on Tuesday, so this was one day before the attack in D.C. Are Are law enforcement officials, Hal, are they going to be looking or perhaps keeping a closer eye on people affiliated with Operation Allies Welcome moving forward?
I think that's inevitable that they will, but I think they're going to be looking at a number of other programs. Look, Afghanistan's not the only country where we've had individuals come over that have done heinous things here in this country. I mean, if you look at what's going on with the cartels, that part of the premise there is we've had some quote bad actors unquote come into the United States for a variety of reasons and do horrible criminal activity here. So we'll be looking at a number of countries where we just simply can't do the thoroughness of vetting that we'd like to do in those from those particular countries. And there's a number of countries around the world that we just simply can't do a whole lot of vetting. And so that's, I mean, it may seem like a knee-jerk reaction to put everything on hold right now. I think part of it is a practical approach, which is, can we actually say who's who and who might be leaning this direction or whatever? And I'm sure someone turned around and said, no, as of right now, we probably can't. And so it may seem like a little bit of overreach by sort of a blanket, freeze everything in place, no more processing of folks for asylum from certain countries. But it's trying to work through some of these processes and maybe implement some further procedures in that overall vetting process before we give them permanent asylum here in the U.S. To make sure that they have not changed, or if they had a hidden agenda, that we pick up on that hidden agenda, whatever it is. So there's a lot that's got to be, there's some corrective action that has to be taken for this. What's happened in Washington, D.C., obviously this example here, and happening in such close proximity, it does raise a red flag. I should also point out that I think we may have talked about a while back that, with Thanksgiving is a quintessential American holiday. And so that from a potential terrorist targeting perspective, it raises your threat awareness a little bit more, realizing that there are those out there that may want to seize on a quintessential American holiday in order to make a statement. And it should make everyone kind of lean forward a little bit and be a little bit more vigilant to see if they see something that looks suspicious, or if they've been seeing something suspicious, that they say something about it. And too often, that's the problem. Isn't, after the event, it's always frustrating. All these people come forward and go, oh, I knew they were saying this. Oh, I heard them say this. I saw them do this. I was like, that's great. Could you have said something before the attack took place? Because maybe we could have done something so that, that Monday morning quarterback or Monday morning, quarterback sort of analysis doesn't do me a lot of good. I really want them to be proactive and say something along with just seeing something.